Okay, good. Hello, everyone. I'm Donnelly, your Tai Chi examiner. And I just came back from Patagonia as well as Antarctica. The trip was amazing, but I arrived home 1:30 a.m. this morning and did not go to bed until 2:30. Yeah, and there are 5 hours time difference between where I am and also about Patagonia. However, I am just so excited, and I want to talk to Bill Donnelly about his new book. And I just can first Bill say, and maybe we can wait a little bit once you settle down or whatever. But I feel fine, and especially I'm talking about my favorite book, so I don't want to postpone this interview with Bill. Hey, Bill, say hi to everyone.
Hi, Violet, and it's great to see you. It's been a while, right? I think you and I have done these types of podcasts back during the pandemic a few years ago.
Yes, very true. And I really appreciate that. And some of you probably know, and that Bill has a very successful career in the finance area. And he also does some kind of life coaching for some high power executive in the finance area. And he's also a musician, a drummer, but Tai Chi and martial art is his passion. And he has been practicing Tai Chi and martial art for 30-some years, right? Am I right? And so recently he published the book and called In the Secret. And this book is really very well written. And actually 2 years ago, right? And Bill, you came to me and you asked me to write a foreword for you. And that time, I was just in a life-changing situation. I moved to Las Vegas, a brand new city, and left St. Louis, which I lived most of my life. Yes, and 30-some years, almost 40 years. And I moved to Las Vegas. Everything's new, and I was moving to a new house. So there were so many things going on. So I read your book, and I felt, this book was well written because you are so knowledgeable about so many things. Not only your knowledge in the Tai Chi Chuan, in martial art, but also in philosophy, both Eastern philosophy and probably and Western philosophy. And it shows the incredible depths in this book. But that time, because I was very busy, and I wanted to finish writing the foreword for you, so I read quickly and and wrote a foreword. But recently, and because I had more time, and also your book came out, and so I reread your book. And this time I allowed myself more time, and I read it more like leisurely, but seriously. Yes, leisurely, but seriously. And sometimes I read, and you see, I dog ear the book so much, and yeah, because I like the book a lot, and I think it's like your book is just like Tai Chi Chuan. And sometimes people practice Tai Chi Chuan. First they say, oh, this is interesting, right? But the more you got into it, the more you find out, oh my God, this is so profound, so deep. And it's the same thing with your book. Once I read your book again, and actually I wanted to slow down. And I read it and I put it aside, and I just chew on the words and the thoughts. And I said, wow, this is very, very deep, very, very profound. And just for your information, I bought quite a few copies and to give to friends and my students. And because I saw that this is precious. And my students first say, "Oh, you don't have to. What buy it?" But I feel like say, this is so well written, and I value it greatly. So I wanted to give to people as a gift. That's why I pay for the book. And so, okay. Um, how about this way? Let's talk a little bit about your experience and some of the people who did the free Tai Chi and Qigong, and then during the pandemic time, they know about you, but some people they might not have. So why don't you just share with us your background as far as the martial art and Tai Chi Chuan?
Sure, sure. Well, thank you. And thank you for all those really kind words. I appreciate it. Inner Secrets was a labor of love, and it was a 5-year journey to bring that all together. So I really appreciate that somebody with your background and knowledge actually enjoyed it and got something out of it. For those who maybe you're just meeting me for the first time, I'm talking to you from New York, where I've lived my entire life. As Violet mentioned, I was a musician. And so my background really was when I was a child, like so many kids, I would watch, the superhero television shows. And while a lot of kids in the neighborhood was watching Batman, I would watch the Green Hornet for the 10 seconds that Bruce Lee would explode onto the scene and, beat up all the bad guys. And I just was so fascinated with that. I wanted to train in Kung Fu when I was 6 or 7 years old, but living on Long Island, we really didn't have that. There were some local karate schools and judo schools. I was not interested in that. And so for me, it was all or nothing with Kung Fu. For about 34 years, I moved on to become a musician. I have studied drumming with some of the greatest musicians in the world, and I kind of made my life there. But in a life-altering situation that opens Inner Secrets, it became apparent that defending oneself is important. And the way I have explained it to people is, we protect our money, we protect our homes, we protect our passwords, but very few people protect themselves. And I decided that it was time to invest in that. And as luck would have it, a Kung Fu school did open nearby. So in my mid-30s, I decided to start to train along with my wife, who then, had our first child and dropped out of training. But I went all in. And for me, Kung Fu was the thing I really wanted to do. I would pass by the Tai Chi classes and think, they're not doing anything. I'm not interested in that, right? Very common misconception. And but one day I did take the plunge, and I realized then and there that it was so much more than I thought. And so I started to train in Tai Chi, and I wasn't as serious about that for the first year or so. And starting Kung Fu in your mid-30s is not always the easiest thing to do. I mean, I was pretty good at it, but I wasn't doing flying, spinning kicks or anything like that. And I'm not a big guy. So I was starting to kind of find my place. But in one day, I was working on a trapping drill with my Sifu. And I spontaneously launched a strike that was really an internal technique, and it was really effective. And it occurred to me then that that's probably where my strength is, and I'm going to pursue that. So whereas I started in Kung Fu and I didn't really emphasize a lot of Tai Chi, over time that changed. And I started to really focus more on Tai Chi. And then a year or so after that, my instructor had left, and there was nobody still training in Tai Chi. So I went to my Sifu and I said, if I warm them up, will you teach the class? And he agreed to do that. So I would do maybe a 20-minute warm up, and he would train for 40 minutes to an hour. And then I would warm them up for 25 to 30 minutes, and then he would train a little bit. And then one day I walked into his office and he said, "You're teaching today." And
You
yeah,
must
and
be progressing very well.
well, maybe I was, but as a student, but not as a teacher. And so I was now thrown into this, and that was it. I was now the Tai Chi instructor, and Violet, over the course of about 3 or 4 weeks, I managed to lose every student in that school that was studying Tai Chi. So there was like an empty room I came into one day, and I said, all right, I'm just not getting this. And, to my Sifu's credit, he said, just keep coming back. When you own a business, you don't want students walking out the door, right? You want them coming in. And he just saw something in me and said, just stick to it. So for me, I tended to apply a lot of the discipline that I learned through drumming and music in terms of how to practice, but also how to learn. And I started to really develop a way of teaching. And that forced me to really look deeply into Tai Chi and understand not just how to do it, but why. What's the technique? What is the history? What's the theory? And the more I learned, the more fascinating it became, and it really became this obsession for me, that continues to this day. I mean, I've been practicing now for 25 years, and in my mind, I'm still very much a beginner. I think that there's still a lot to learn, and then there's a lot of different ways that people look at our art, and that they bring to things to the surface that I've never considered. And so it keeps it open and endless and vast and fascinating, very much like music has been for me. And so I think that this will be the thing that I take to my grave.
It's very interesting, and you mentioned how music and Tai Chi and has some similarities, and yes, and actually there are quite a lot of famous musicians, and they practice Tai Chi, and you probably know they're very well, like Lou Reed, and he was considered as the grandfather of the grunge music, and Tony Visconti, who is a very famous music producer as well as a guitar player, and Tony Visconti, he produced many successful records from David Bowie, and he's also how should I say a Tai Chi enthusiast, and they all find there's a lot of similarity between the music and also Tai Chi Chuan. And for somebody who are new to the Tai Chi Chuan, and a lot of time that they don't understand Tai Chi Chuan. Yes, it's a healing art, especially nowadays. A lot of medical field, the doctors start telling patients, maybe you should practice Tai Chi, right? And if you have hypertension or have depression, and they ask people to take Tai Chi Chuan. But Tai Chi Chuan is also a martial art, as well as how should I say, performing art. And then not
Mm-hmm.
to mention, and the Tai Chi Chuan itself embody a lot of the philosophy. And when you were just speaking and how you started, you want to do the hostile martial art like Bruce Lee, and then you got drawn to Tai Chi, which is a lot of time people think it's slow. And one time, a student of mine asked me a question, and then it says, "Well, how come Type A people with Type A personality? Actually, I do have Type A personality. will, will practice Tai Chi." And I, in your book, and I there's one thing you have a one quote very interesting. You talk about slow is smooth, right? Smooth is fast.
Slow
Or
is smooth
something.
and smooth is fast. Yeah, it's a Navy
Yeah,
SEAL.
and it's a Navy SEAL. Would you mind explain a little bit and how does that relate to Tai Chi practice and so forth? And when I read it, I said, "Oh my God, this is great!" So right away, I sent that quote to my student. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was slow is smooth and smooth is fast is a Navy SEAL's maxim. And when I found that, I felt like I struck gold because it really sums up what it is that we're trying to do. Um, Inner Secrets, one of the things that I really tried to do with the book is answer what the most common questions are, right? I'm sure you're asked all the time. I'm asked all the time, why do you do it slow? Or they say, oh, it's so slow, like it's a bad thing. And so I devoted a chapter to that. What I found was that when I started to train, and the more I trained, that physically I was removing the burrs and obstructions that was allowing me to smooth out my movement. But it wasn't just smoothing out my physical movement, because to achieve that required me to also be relaxed in my thinking. So I was smoothing out my thinking too. And being in that relaxed state allowed my thought, or my thinking mind, and my moving body to be synchronized, which meant that I can function uh, faster, for lack of a better word, than if the two were operating separately. And if I had all these physical obstructions that were creating friction and maybe slowing down my movement. So I find that when we work on that mode of movement, that it actually allows us to function more efficiently. And in doing so, we can move faster because we don't have these obstructions. And I think one of the
Yeah.
things I talked about in that chapter was how athletes, when they're reviewing their own performance, will slow down the video so that they can observe all the movements. And to me, it seems that the Tai Chi masters did that before video. They slowed themselves down so they can be very meticulous and really trace the movement, trace the flow of energy, and make sure that it's moving in a continuum.
And I like how you put it, and you say it's not just the movement of thinking everything. So, another way is why people are slowing down. They actually put themselves in a more meditative state. And as we know, and just like in your book, you refer to many of the scientific studies, and to show how meditation really help people with health. So yeah, it is kind of fascinating. And I remember when I first learning Tai Chi, so, this is a martial art as well as a healing art. How did that happen? Right?
Right.
But they actually tie into each other very well. And from time to time, I'm still struggling, and they're trying to articulate and why that is the case. And I think you did a very good job to explain why these things, actually are connected. And that's just incredible. And again, I think you've done an excellent job there. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it was, a lot of work. And when I was working on the book, I would work the spring and the fall, and I would take off in, let's say, the Christmas holidays or over the summer, which made the process longer. But I think it was also a good thing because it allowed me time to really reflect, and I was still developing and growing myself in my understanding and proficiency. So it allowed me to really reflect and look back on what it was that I was trying to do. I think that Tai Chi, the thing that's probably most fascinating about it is, to your point, it's a philosophy, a system of health, and a system of self-defense, and they all intersect in subtle ways. And how do you make those connections? It wasn't easy for me to do, and there were times when I was working with my editor, and she's like, What do you mean? What does this mean?" She has no Tai Chi background, and which made her perfect because I had to explain to somebody who had zero comprehension of what this art is, and explain to her exactly what I meant. So it forced me to be more explicit, and show those connections wherever I could.
Yeah, well, you certainly have done a very good job, and like I say, and at the same time, I think a lot of time, it's quite profound. So yes, this book, and I recommend it for beginner or some people don't even know Tai Chi, and I think it's fascinating to understand it, at least see what it is. And but also it's great for people practice for a long time, because the more you get into it, and then you will understand some of the stuff Bill says, and it will resonate with you. At least that's my case. It is, oh yes, and then you can see things from that angle, and then it just strike a chord with me, and I think it is very good. I really recommend people, if you have practiced Tai Chi for a long time, you want to read this book slowly, and it's just like drinking a fine wine or having a great tea. And then so when you read it slow, you have time to digest, and then to savor the really nice part of it. So you talk about how when you first started, and your training in the music, especially drumming, help you to focus doing Tai Chi. Then how your Tai Chi practice help you with music, or not at all?
No, it actually, it did, and I noticed the effect right away. I'm naturally an introvert, and shy by nature, even though I perform, which really forces me out of that. But as somebody who is an introvert, I always have an internal dialogue, and I'm very attuned to myself, my own thoughts and feelings. What I found with Tai Chi was that it was starting to change my physiology in terms of the way I was playing the instrument, um, in that I was not fighting gravity. I found that some of the lessons that I've learned from some of the greatest musicians actually paralleled very much to Tai Chi. So, for instance, when I had taken a lesson with Joe Morello, who is a very famous jazz drummer with the Dave Brubeck Quartet, he would talk about keeping the shoulders down and keeping the elbows down, which is rooting.
Interesting. Just like we do Tai Chi.
Exactly. When I took a lesson with Morris Arnie Lang, who is the principal percussionist of the New York Philharmonic, and Arnie would talk about, as I'm throwing the stick down to the head, that the energy, more or less, I'm paraphrasing, but the energy would travel through the arm to the end of the stick and to the tip of the stick. And I said to Arnie, you know, when we study sword techniques, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, you know, bring the chi to the tip of the sword. So there was all of these parallels that were happening. I explained some of that in the book as well. Um, the famous classical violinist who talks about just playing the note on the fretboard of his violin, the sensation or energy actually starts at the toes and travels up the entire body to the hand. So it is very much a connection. And I also found that my creativity opened up because I was getting faster at getting the conscious mind out of the way. And when you're playing music interactively, it's almost like push hands because you can't think about yourself. You really can't even think about the other person. You have to communicate without the ego in the way. And so as I let go, my nature as an artist started to really come through. And that's where I was developing more of my own sound, my signature, and doing it without worrying about if it was good enough or right. It was just how I express myself in this world through sound, if it's music, and then through the form of Tai Chi. When I've taught musicians, I've noticed that it's improved their playing. If they are singers or horn players, for instance, their lung capacity opens up, so they tend to do better there. Or their endurance or playing a night of music can be tiring. If they're traveling musicians, Qigong and Tai Chi is great because you can really do it anywhere, as you do in Antarctica. And
Yes,
I've done.
I'm crazy. I'm crazy in that department. I practice everywhere I go.
Yeah, as do I, and I think most serious practitioners do that because we're able to. You know, you don't need to get to a gym to do it, and so for musicians, it's really been a great thing. And there was something I said. I was teaching a musician once early on, and you know, she came to like a second or third lesson or whatever, and I could tell she didn't practice, and so I said, did you practice? And she said, no. I said, so let me ask you a question. Before you perform, do you tune up your instrument? And she said, of course. I would never walk on stage without tuning my instrument. I said, well, why would you start your day without tuning your instrument yourself? And I think that,
I like that. I like that. That's so neat. That's so neat. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it made a difference. And you know, with I think anybody who does it, but certainly with musicians, they've benefited from it. I benefit from it. I need to practice every day, and it just starts the day the right way. Um, we're all dealing with a lot. I think now maybe more than ever, and so why not have a strategy and a resource to kind of bring yourself into tune, and then you can walk out the door and deal with the rest of the world.
Yeah, very, very good. And one thing you touch upon is uh, Tai Chi Chuan and normally, tell us let go, right? And yes, if we constantly have that ego there, then we cannot let go. When we can not let go, and then it affect our own creativity and affect how we will perform in many ways like that. So I think it's at least for myself and practice Tai Chi Chuan. It's a good way, and sometimes especially practice in public, just wherever I'm at the airport, I will, when I wait for the plane delayed 3 hours, I will just practice there, right? And some people just like, well, people looking, it's like, let go, right? Let go. Don't worry about judgment.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny you say that, because whenever if I practice somewhere public, it could be a beach or a park or someplace I haven't been before, I'm always maybe a little self-conscious for the first 10 minutes or so, and after that, it's just well, this is what I'm going to do. But I find that and I find that with Tai Chi, people they recognize it more or less, and some people are interested, others aren't. Some people think it's, hippie, freakish new age stuff, and that's fine. That's up to them. They don't know what they're missing, but um, they're robbing themselves with a preconceived notion. But I find that just as many people, are curious. And when I was in California a few years ago, I was practicing in a park early in the morning, and later that day, when I was walking back to my hotel, this person came out of nowhere and said, "Hey, what were you doing this morning?" And I said, "Well, it's Tai Chi and blah blah blah." And he said, "Hey, it just looked really amazing. I'm a college student. I'm so stressed out right now, and something like that would probably be perfect for me." And so I taught him the stance, because I think that's the easiest thing to teach somebody first. And I said, if you can get that up to 20 minutes a day, it's really going to help you. And he thought it was great. And here's an example, and I think you exemplify that, where just by practicing in public, you could change somebody's life and somebody's perception of what's available to them. And that's a great thing.
Well, thank you for saying that. And of course, a lot of time, like I say, I'm training myself, because I have to train myself to let go. So that's one way to do it. And so in your career, and you have coached a lot of people, and in the finance area, and you're talking about a lot of negotiation and so forth. So can you give some of the example and how Tai Chi may help people to negotiate?
Sure. I think that first, I think it's important to note that if you're in the business world, I think entering into any kind of business situation or negotiation, stating that you're going to take a Tai Chi approach is probably not going to work. But I think you can apply the concepts in a practical way and have amazing results. So what do I mean by that? When I'm working on a negotiation, yin yang would be the first thing that comes to mind for that. Negotiation is a give and take. We want to make sure that we're giving the other person what they want or need, but we're also protecting our own interests. So for me, anytime I'm negotiating, I don't start by talking, I start by listening. So I want to bring them in, right? And so if I were to look at it in terms of Tai Chi or, Kung Fu or conflict or anything like that, I tend to look at whether it's a negotiating party, whether it's a person who's even issuing any level of aggression, whether it's an authoritative stance or somebody that's trying to dominate. Any of those things are an antagonistic force. I refer to them as an antagonistic force, and we want to let that force come in. It will travel only so far, and then of course our principles are to yield and redirect and issue that. Well,
So
that's
you're
pretty
talking
much
about
what
like the Tai Chi Chuan push hands, the
absolutely.
yielding, right? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really the same thing. So we have to let them come to us. So in negotiation, I want to hear what they have to say. I want to understand what's important to them. And I cannot effectively do that if I'm thinking with my own agenda. So first I have to understand what they need. Now I can start to turn, how do I turn that situation? Well, I turn that situation by maybe reiterating to them, okay, let me make sure I understand. Is this what you're asking for? Is this what is important to you? Yes, yes, no, yes, whatever those conditions are, whatever those terms are. Okay, fine. Now I have that. Now I can respond in my own way, maybe with what I need. And I can show them, well, I can give you this, I can give you that. I really can't give you this other thing. But what if we work on a compromise here or we do something like that? We've engaged. We've engaged in a back and forth. We've engaged in a give and take, a yin yang. And so neither of us are going to come away with everything we want, but we'll probably both come away with what we really need to get out of that agreement. And because of that, we should be able to move forward in a way that is satisfying and lasting, because the agreement we want to last. And so when I've worked on negotiations, I've never really had anybody come back to me and feel like they compromised themselves, that they made a mistake at all. I think that they've actually felt pretty good about it. I think if more people just applied that simple principle, we would probably get more done, not only in our lives, but maybe in our government too.
Actually, this is a very good point, right? We maybe can use more Tai Chi in our government, our Congress. Yeah.
Yes. We need Democratic and Republican push-in competitions.
That's a great idea. Yes, let's have a push and contest. Of course, first they have to learn it. Yes, and that's great. And you have so many great points in this book, and I feel like I would like to talk to you for all these, but we may not have all the time today, and I like to invite you back some the time. And as I mentioned, this book I feel is good for people who doesn't know anything about Tai Chi, as well as people practice Tai Chi for a long time. And so for the folks who's out there watching this video and read my article, and if you're interested learning Tai Chi Chuan and you're trying to find a teacher, Bill, do you have any suggestion how people should find a good teacher? You and I we're both lucky, right? We got a good teacher to begin with.
Yeah, we were both lucky. I would say, and I wanted to ask you about this because I thought on your website you had developed a directory, but in the absence of that, I would say word of mouth is probably the best way to start. And if you know somebody like Violet who's an expert, you could pretty much share the the background, the lineage, and the teaching style of the teacher that you're interested in, and hopefully, somebody like Violet can help you vet that teacher. But I think beyond that, also, if you speak to any teacher, that they should be able to convey not only their history, but I think that they should be able to explain the art in, comprehensively. I have come across certain people that they make it more mysterious than it needs to be, and
Yes.
I think that obfuscation is really just camouflage for lack of understanding. And so if you don't understand what your potential Tai Chi teacher is saying, then they're probably the wrong teacher.
I think that makes perfect sense, and actually, what Bill was just saying is kind of true. And I have been helping a lot of people and to find good teachers when people that they're in different city or different countries, and they will ask me, and I would say, well, I help them to find a local instructor. If I sometimes I read their bio, and I look at their form, and I will provide some kind of feedback. And yes, I do a lot of those things. But it's also very important. People should like Bill says, find somebody with good lineage. And Bill, you certainly have a very good lineage and well trained. And I also want to mention, and while we were doing the free lesson and during the COVID time, and I have heard from so many people, and they say, Bill's class is tough, even though it looks very easy, and because you're very meticulous, and even though the movement may seem kind of easy, but you address the important fundamentals, and it's very good. And you also talk about the purpose of the movement, and that was very helpful for many of the students. And sometimes I follow your teaching, so, oh my God, this is I'm going to be sore. Yes, very, very good. And well, Bill, thank you very, very much, and for writing this book. And I know you have another book coming up soon, right?
Yeah, I do. And I'll send it to you soon. This one is specifically for the beginner,
Oh,
and
that
it is
would be
for,
great. Yeah.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
it is. As you know, there are so many people who start training in Tai Chi, and the beginning is hard because you're not just walking through your forms. It's there's a lot to learn in terms of stance work and body alignment and all these things. And my experience is that in those first few months, either they take to Tai Chi right away or they fall off. And so what I've done is worked on creating something that will maybe help them have a sense of progression until they kind of get it figured out and it clicks for them. And so I think it's good for students, and I think it may be a good teaching aid, so that Tai Chi Sifus or have something that they can that this person can use to measure their progress on their own time, and maybe they won't be so quick to leave.
Good, and I will be looking forward to reading your new book. And thank you very much. And I think that this is a great book, and I recommend this for people of all level or never even know anything about Tai Chi. And now you will know something about it. And thank you all very much for watching this video. If you have any questions for me or for Bill, you you can send it to me. You can post on the YouTube and also on my website. Thank you all very much.